good evening, good evening, good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, it is your host, Brian Forbes, and this is the Black Factor. And here we are again, ready to get it in and do it one more time, because as much as I hate it, we down to a week, once a week. We're going to bring it back up one of these days. But for right now, we are in the building, and we are going to chop it up and talk about all things that affect us, all things black. Y'all know what I'm talking about. You know what it is. So welcome to the Black Factor, where perspective is everything. And don't forget, y'all, we have the news that you can use, because the truth don't care about your opinion. It is the truth, regardless. All right, so before we get started real good, y'all remember you got to catch me on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and of course we got the business page now, the Facebook Black Factor page, just in case you don't want to check me out on my personal page. Y'all know I mix it all up. It don't matter one way or the other. And don't forget our podcast. And let me say welcome to my oh so smooth radio family who are simulcast with us currently. It's over there with my man Shorty Smooth and the crew. So we are doing that thing, and don't forget you can download that app at the Play Store and Apple iTunes, just for future reference, because you just might want to check it out while you move around and ride in your car or something like that. Do the thing that way. All right. So y'all hang on. We got WB Reese in the house. I see you, my brother. So y'all hang on 1 second. We're going to get this party started. All right. So check it out, y'all. Here's the deal. We did some shows over this first part of the year where we talked about mental illness, especially dealing with everything with COVID and, people going through a lot. COVID has put people in some real interesting positions. You know what I'm saying? It's changed things for a lot of people and a lot of lives. So really what we're going to talk about today deals more with mental health, because that's a topic that just continues to keep coming up. And I guess I'm disappointed. I'm sad. I'm upset. I'm angry. I don't know what I'm feeling, but I feel like, this is something that keeps being overlooked. And it's like the elephant in the room in society. It's like, when do we address mental health? When do we address the issues that are obviously the things that are, that we have to deal with? It's a lot happening with that whole thing. Now, I want to say, right off the top, we have to ask ourselves, who decides who's mentally ill? I personally think that is such a slippery slope, but that's a decision that some of us have to make on our own. We have to decide that maybe something isn't right, but then that will require us to be honest with ourselves, and most people are not capable of being that honest. Most people don't want to be that honest, because it means they actually have to face themselves. You have people who live in some very delusional worlds, and they make up stuff as they go along. You got people who are habitual pathological liars. You got people who will have a conversation with you one way and then change that conversation over with someone else, and it'd be a different way. And, it just depends on who they're talking to at the time. If you ask me, that is a level of mental illness within itself. But then we have to worry about the extreme, because this is a wide spectrum. This is a wide berth of truth and honesty. WB Reese says some mental health claims are misdiagnosed by healthcare for money. Now, I agree with that as well. And and all healthcare workers, to be honest, are not created equally. And then I also believe that, what? That reminds me. I actually have a friend who recently went through that portion of her education, and in fact is about to get her master's degree, I believe, in mental health. And we were discussing some of the things that go on in mental health. The problem for me, where she is concerned, is that we're discussing a white woman who has basically lived her life in what I believe, now this is my personal opinion, based on my conversations with her, in a rather sheltered life, in a rather sheltered environment. And when you live that, and a person like myself, and I'll just give you an example, because I'm gonna discuss this later on, not discuss it, but bring it up. CNN had on a show over on Monday, on the anniversary of the Tulsa massacre, what we know as Black Wall Street. It came on CNN. It was a very good special, by the way. And I encourage it. It will be re-airing, by the way, next Saturday at 9 o'clock. I encourage everyone to watch that special dealing with Black Wall Street and the burning of Black Wall Street. Anyway, I asked her the other day before it came on Monday. We were both out doing some work in our yards, and I said, "Have you ever heard of Black Wall Street?" She said, "I may have heard of that." I said, "Well, at first I mentioned, had you heard about the Tulsa massacre?" And she said, "Well, no, I've never heard of that." I said, "Well, you ever heard of Black Wall Street?" She said, "Yeah, I think I've heard of that." Now, when I talk about things like that to someone like her, as a black person, if I go into her office, for example, when she begins her practice, and I need mental therapy in regard to what is bothering me and the things that will culturally affect me, what will she be able to do in regard to helping me with my problem when she has no idea that these problems even exist? Now, I'm just using this as an example. It's not to say that she won't be great at what she does. It's just the fact that when we start talking about the things that affect us individually, and a person who is not clear about the things that are going on in the world or have gone on in the world, it will make it, in my opinion, very difficult for that person without a lot of research and study to begin to understand what my issues may be. So I said that to say, and if you all remember, those of you who were tuned in, we had Dr. Bethea on the show a few months ago, who is a mental health specialist, when we did our last mental health show. And she did say that in her experience, and we're talking about a woman who retired many years ago in the field, and she did specifically say that the medical industry does not address the needs of black patients. And she said that it was something that she had to learn, mainly because she had been in the industry for so long, and it was never really clear until she dealt with the built-in racism that is part of the medical industry. And of course, when we watch episodes of shows like the burning of Black Wall Street, the Tulsa, Oklahoma situation, then people wonder why black people do not trust the government or those who are in power, because it affects and has affected us since the beginning of chattel slavery. And we're talking about a period of over 400 years. We're talking about 1690. That's when, 1609. That's when all of this stuff began. So when we look at people and we start to make sort of jokes, if you will, about people that we think are crazy. When we were growing up, it was always, "Oh, that person is crazy." It was a joke. It was a funny thing. But the fact is, we do have people around us who are what I like to call certifiable. They own paper. They own paper for real. They literally have had medical diagnosis of mental illness on some level. Now, while I do believe that we're all capable of having some of that, because the standards nowadays are so far and so all over the place, it's hard to tell who the crazy people really are. Because if you follow politics, you believe right now that those in power, if you followed their line of thinking, that they were the ones that were sane, when we know that what they're doing is absolutely unhinged. And then you have to ask yourself why they're doing it. What's the motivation behind it? Well, there's something there. But when we talk about athletes, for example, because we're going to talk about Naomi Osaka. Naomi Osaka, who is the tennis champion now, who pulled out of the last tennis tournament because she didn't want to attend the press conferences. And it makes you wonder, or have to ask yourself, that when people like her are on the world stage and she's playing her game and she's doing her thing, very talented, very, very strong athlete, at the top of the game, getting paid the whole nine. But when she steps aside and says that I don't want to participate in a social affair, which the media portion of anything is the part where you become human to others, and they see you and they discuss with you and they talk with you or talk to you about your performance and what you're doing. And she didn't feel comfortable under those circumstances. But what happens when you push someone like that too far? What happens, because one thing that we don't address, for example, we look at athletes, and there have been many in the past who have committed suicide, for example, who have done destructive things, who have committed crimes, who have reverted to drug abuse. When these things happen, we make jokes. I mean, generally society makes jokes. We go, oh yeah, that person, oh, there's just something wrong with them. They got all this money and they got all of this fame, and then they turn around and screw it all up, and we think that there's something wrong with that. But see, I have a rule, and this is a rule that I've followed for many, many years, and that about money. And that is, people think that money changes people. Money does not. And I want you to be very clear. Money does not change people. All money does is magnify whomever or whatever you are. If you're an asshole, money is going to show how big an asshole you really are. If you're a person who is a good person, a philanthropist, a giver, a lover, a person who takes care of others, it's going to show in your money. It's going to show that you were a good person before you ever had any, and that you're going to be a good person when you don't. That's the truth about money. Money doesn't change people. Money only magnifies what you are. Now, for that very reason, people come into sports, entertainment, and other areas of what we believe are levels of fame and fortune, and they've already got these issues. They just happen to blow up in the middle of it all. You have entertainers who have killed themselves at the height of their careers. You have entertainers who have overdosed at the height of their careers. All of that was for another reason. It wasn't just because they were recreationally out. Oh yeah, let's get high today. Let's see what we can do next. No, they were masking something else. That underlying feeling of inadequacy or, not being what they wanted to be, or the bipolar, the depression. These things happen to people with money, people who are successful, people who are famous, people who are rich. You cannot buy those things away. Yeah, you can pay for some good therapy maybe, and hopefully, those who would recognize that they have a problem would do that. But that's not always the case. So, we tend to blame these people or even criminalize what they do. For example, you got people out here who do things, they're self-destructive. Self-destruction is a terrible thing, and sometimes self-destruction comes in forms that we don't immediately recognize. And that, as an example, you have people, and I'm going to use women, for example, who will continuously attract the worst kind of men for them. And it's just something in the dysfunction of a terrible mate that they continue to gravitate toward. That's a level of mental illness. That's a level of not knowing self. That's a level of not being able to deal with something from within. I see a lot of women, they always be talking about where all the good men at? Why can't I find a man? Oftentimes, not oftentimes, every time. Let me say this, and this applies to both genders, and anybody else who identifies in any other gender. Usually, the problems that you run into when it comes to dating are more internal than they are external. The problems that you run into in dating usually have more to do with yourself than they do the person that you are trying to make be something that they usually are not. Now, I digress on that. But this got me to also thinking, because we have to remember now, a lot of this is sickness. It's considered sickness. But let's look at this. And the reason this came up, because a story came up today, and I got to thinking about what the effects are of exclusion from sports because one is transgender. Now, that came up because there were a couple of stories in the news today that I found interesting in that regard. Now, there's a lot going on in that direction. But we clown and we make jokes, but we don't know what these people are going through. We don't know what effects are being had on their personal psyche, on their mind. Imagine walking around, and some of you probably don't even have to imagine, but imagine walking around every single day and you got this one thing that's nagging you to death, just bugging you, is eating you up from the inside out, and you can't tell anybody, or you can't deal with what that thing is. Unfortunately, I have met far too many women who have been molested, who have had people put their hands on them and things of that nature, that have to live with this every single day. Those are grounds for the beginnings of mental illness. Something that can eat you and eat you and eat you. And you can't just automatically say, well, you got to let it go. It's easy to say when it ain't you. It's easy to make those determinations and find fault everywhere and say, well, you just got to kind of move on. Some people do move on easier than others, but some people don't. And they live with that burden their entire life, and that weighs on a person, So these are just things that we have to think about. They always say, you don't know what the next person is going through. And that's absolutely true. And that's something that we need to always consider when we deal with our fellow man in all situations. And I know it's hard because we are all usually self-absorbed most of the time. So we're not really, worrying about what the next person is dealing with. So we don't address it properly, if you will. Mental health in the black community, it's a serious issue. And we still have, just as an example, the residue of slavery, the black codes, Jim Crow, the KKK, systemic racism, discrimination, and that list goes on and on and on. And it's a wonder that black folks collectively have not snapped as yet. And I believe that is part of what the big worry in the world is these days. People are concerned about the time when black folks have had enough, because the mental illness within our community alone runs very deep, extremely deep. And no one is saying, wow, what must it be like to have to go through what you go through? Because they don't care. They're the ones that I was just talking about, and they clown. So today, Representative Jimmy Patton in Florida, 40 other House members in Florida, they joined 7 other Republican states to ban transgender girls and women in public secondary schools and colleges from participating on girls and women's sport teams after Republican Governor Ron DeSantis signed the measure into law on Tuesday. So here is a situation, and I'm gonna be transparent. I don't know if I should give my opinions on this show, but I'm going to. It's my show. I have to say that I agree with not allowing transgender. They say females. I still say male. I don't want to no disrespect to anybody, but you were born a male. To me, you're a male, and I don't think that they have any business running up against females on the track. Now, we in this country in particular, we're very adamant about equality, and that's fine, except that we all know that all things are not equal. They're just not, and there's not a lot that we can do to make it that way, because we're still dealing with human beings. And while I think that everybody should have their own opportunities and their own chances to do things, I do believe that physically speaking, some things just are not equal. And I mean, just as an example, let's say, and I know this is probably my analogies get crazy sometimes, but if one of those if a transgender female, as they call it, were to put her hands on another female, what would the reaction be? Would it be, you don't hit a woman? Or would it be two women got into a fight? Now, I challenge anybody on that one. I guarantee you, you're not going to say that that was two women fighting. You're going to say he was physically stronger than her, which is the same scenario when we talk about competition in sports. So the Florida governor, they banned transgender sports participation, and it's an anti-trans sport ban is what they've called it. Now, my question to you all, my audience, how do you feel about transgender sports inclusion? And everybody seems to cite this whole thing about the track. There was a couple of transgender women running track against natural women. And see, I'd probably get in trouble for that. See, that's the funny thing about this. I say natural woman and I'm crazy, they want to make me crazy for stating a fact. Because regardless of how they feel about themselves, they still were born male. I digress. But my question to you all is, how do you feel about that scenario? Show me some thumbs up for you don't agree with males, well, transgender in sports, and show me some hearts if you agree with it. Because it has its place, I guess, but I still struggle with the idea. And one of the reasons why I struggle with that idea, and it got me to thinking earlier while I was working on all of this, I got to thinking, are transgender, because I know they changed the rules in the military where it's they used to be don't ask, don't tell. Now they're able to openly be whatever they want to be, which is fine. But I wonder if now a transgender woman, although born male, would be put into a frontline combat situation. I think the policy in the military, now correct me if I'm wrong, I think I got some military on here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a time when women were not allowed on frontline combat. Would they allow a naturally born male who is transgender now, a woman, to fight on the front line in combat during war? I don't know. I mean, it crossed my mind and made me think, like, since we're trying to make all things equal, is that a thing? Would that be allowed? I need to find my military people and find that out. Can a woman who identifies as a man be considered a frontline soldier? I don't know. I got to do my homework on that one, y'all. But again, that's, these are the conundrums that we run across as the laws and the times change and things evolve. Now, back on the Dreamland situation, again, I encourage everyone to watch Dreamland. It is on CNN, coming on again next Saturday at 9 o'clock. The Burning of Black Wall Street. You got to watch it. It's very important that you do. It's a lot of good information in there, but it is also the final uncovering of the truth to some degree about what took place there. And it shows the level of cover up and conspiracy that took place as well. And one of the things that I found real interesting about that special was how they explained the origin of residents in that Tulsa area, and how it definitely was part of the Trail of Tears and from the indigenous who were run out of the South, and the 5 so-called, and I say so-called because I get this, it annoyed me when I heard it, the so-called civilized tribes, the 5 so-called civilized tribes. Because when we start talking about civilization, it is based upon what white society determined to be civilized and what wasn't. And if you ask me, those people were quite civilized in their world before the colonizers decided to show up and change things for them. So that within itself is an issue. Let's see. Chris Cheney says, in some aspects, it's reasonable, but in competition, it raises questions about suppressed hormonal system versus a natural DNA woman. Yeah, Chris, I agree. There's so many variables there that you have to be. I guess we have to be careful. And what the thing that I think is more annoying is the fact that we have to be so careful about our terminologies and the way we handle those descriptions, specifically because people get upset because they don't want to be referred to as anything other than when they are in fact other than. So, that's something I guess I'm gonna have to just stand on regardless. Again, the truth doesn't care about people's opinions. And I say that every time I open this show, and that's still going to be the truth, regardless to whether you like what I say or you dislike what I say. The truth just doesn't care about your opinion. So, on the Wall Street situation, this whole event, and for those of you who are familiar, was, of course, swept under the rug for over a century. In fact, the airing of the show on last Monday was the 100th anniversary of that massacre. Now, it occurred to me that the same people who did that, and they're the same people, basically, who created the insurrection on January 6th. Same ones who pretend that January 6th never happened. There is a consistent conspiracy to do as they please. And when I say they, I'm speaking specifically of white males who feel entitled to whatever they want, whenever they want, much like the former president, who is still, in fact, today he said on the news that he will be reinstated to the office of the president in August. He's going to be put back into office. That's what he's telling his people now, and they're all believing him. So unless they are intending to create a civil war in this country, that is not going to happen. And even if they do, it probably still is not going to happen. Not probably, it's not going to happen. So, but the thing about all of this, that particular insurrection and the massacre of Tulsa, the silence of it all, how silent they're all able to be in the wake of their damage, how they are able to pretend like it didn't happen, or as they like to say, throw rocks and hide their hands. And it just makes me believe, it makes me think about the white people in the world who claim to have black friends. Oh, I got black friends. Well, I'll say this. Any white person who claims to have black friends and they remain silent in the face of racism, bigotry, and ignorance, the creation of oppressive laws such as the new voting rights laws that they're trying to put into place to keep people from voting on Sunday after church and so on. If they are silent through this and they don't stand shoulder to shoulder with the rest of us who are trying to fight it, they are liars. It's as simple as that, plain and simple. If you're not standing side by side with other Americans, regardless of their skin tone, for the sake of true democracy and to even the playing field for equality, which we just finished talking about, because we know all things are not equal. But the question becomes, do we remain unequal in the eyes of this society simply because of our skin color? It can't be because of our power, because we don't have power, not the kind that would allow us to be racist. Only power can be racist, and we don't have that. True power is the ability to commit a crime, burn down Tulsa, create an insurrection at the Capitol, and then block or hide the investigation of the crime. That's true power. Black Wall Street and the January 6th insurrection are further proof that by definition, black folks do not have the power to be racist. Only racism can make those changes. Dr. King once said, we remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our so-called friends. Or at least the people who claim They're going to claim that they're our friends. So it made me think, y'all know I go down these rabbit holes. Are the people who get harassed by the police always criminals? Or are they simply being criminalized? And I think we all understand what that means when we talk about the over-policing of our communities, which leads more into the psychological damage and the mental anguish of people in the black community, how black mothers have to explain how their sons are to behave if they encounter law enforcement, or to tell them how to speak, how to dress, how to do the things that they're supposed to do that's going to keep them safe, when in fact we know that's not going to matter. Because when we run across these race soldiers who call themselves police officers, these slave catchers, and there are many who identify with the KKK and black people not being equal in society, it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how much you beg. We've seen the results on a grand scale of what that looks like. But it makes you wonder, when a crime is committed repeatedly in a community, over and over and over, does that provide social indicators as to what is necessary in order to fix those things in the community? Like, there are people in the community selling drugs over and over and over and over. But why? What in the community causes that to be the thing not only to do, but to sell? Because if we had a way to correct the reasons why people were getting high, then the drug dealers wouldn't be making any money, which is their motivation to sell drugs. They just wouldn't be doing it because there would be no money in it. How do we address the real issues instead of putting Band-Aids on the symptoms? See, this is what I'm talking about. We got to get to the root of our problems and deal with them accordingly. Do we keep putting more police in our communities? They're already over-policed. We think that police are the end-all, be-all, the answer, the magic bullet that's going to fix the problems in our community. That's not it. And that's been proven. Black folks have been free in this country for almost 150 years. Well, it's been over 150 years now. And we are constantly being over-policed and constantly put in a position to where we have to defend ourselves against someone who is supposed to protect us. That alone creates mental health issues. The police are not the answer. It's been proven already. But nobody points that part out. See, there's the silence again. That's the deafening silence of society and the people within our own communities and those outside who watch these things take place, yet do nothing, say nothing, and watch and stand by while we get our heads bashed in with a billy club. And nowadays, just flat out murder. There's too many people that have mental health issues that are being killed because these officers claim, I was afraid for my life. You were resisting. And then you have the media and others who watch from the outside and try and find every single possible way to say that that was justified. Yeah, he was a criminal. Yeah, he did drugs. That is not a death sentence, especially under the so-called Constitution that we're supposed to operate under in this country. But then again, we know all things are not equal. Apparently, down in Florida as well, Florida's been real busy lately. 2 children, ages 12 and 14, basically had a gunfight with the sheriff's department yesterday. So it turns out that these 2 ran away from their foster home. Now, there's an issue right there. I didn't even bring that one up. We're talking about people who have been through foster care. Some had good experiences. Most had terrible experiences. Went through foster care. They escaped from their foster care home. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't even say escaped. They ran away from their foster home. And they broke into a house inside of which they took baseball bats and tore up pretty much everything inside the house. Vandalism, right? Well, apparently someone called the police, but while they were in there, they found an arsenal of guns, AR-15, handguns, shotguns, and so on. So the police arrived, and rather than turn themselves over to the police like most children would in fear of the police, they shot back. Or no, I'm sorry, they shot first and continued to shoot. And apparently this went on for hours and hours. They were said to have, the police were said to have attempted to de-escalate the situation throughout the entire event, to try and talk the kids down, to get them to come out, but no, they kept shooting. So an interesting statement that the sheriff himself made on a press conference today was that his time in law enforcement was just about up. He had had about enough. And because he wanted to understand what the world was coming to now. Once again, the chickens coming home to roost. You know what the world is coming to? It is not coming to anything. It is where it has been directed through short-sightedness and idiotic lawmaking. And the funny part is, throughout the parts where these laws and these things were put into place that affected mostly black folks, guess what? The chickens always come home to roost. That's short-sighted thinking. Just like this thing right now with these voter laws. If these Republicans and these conservatives think that the laws that they're putting into place today are not going to come back and kick them in the ass, they are sadly mistaken. The time is coming. It always does. You got to think about the long term. See, this shit, they think in short term. I could go down a list of stuff that they've done the same thing on, and it has always come back to. That's the reason why we have the gun laws in this country we do right now, because of their short-sighted thinking. And now they don't want the gun laws to, oh no, you can't take away our guns. But see, y'all took the guns away to begin with because you didn't want black people to have guns. And it came back to get you. The same thing is going to happen with these voter laws. Trust me, it's coming. So that man said he wanted to know what the world is coming to. The world is where it has been placed. Now, what I found even more interesting, the 12-year-old, which was the little boy, he said, he yelled at the police, according to the sheriff, I'm going to roll this down like GTA. So this was a Grand Theft Auto player. This was one of those kids who liked Grand Theft Auto, and he played the game, and he thought he was in a game of Grand Theft Auto. This is a 12-year-old now. Oh, homie in there cutting up, shooting at the police like he is in a video game. Then that made me think, what would have happened if this same kid, or let's say a black kid. Now, the only reason I'm saying that is because of the age of these children, we'll never know who they were. We'll never know their names, and we'll never know what they look like. But I'm willing to bet you, I'm just willing to put money on the fact that they're still alive, that they wasn't black. Would they have had, or would there be a bigger uproar if that tagline that he used, I'm going to roll this down like GTA, were a tagline from a rap song, from a rapper nobody liked? Would people be raising hell? See, rap music, oh my God. Y'all remember that? Remember in the 80s and 90s when they went nuts on the rap music and they wanted everything to be banned and censored and all that kind of stuff? But this is a video game, and ain't nobody black create that game. And then that made, see, this rabbit hole, y'all, rabbit hole. So then that made me think, are video games potentially a part of mental illness in our society today? Because it provides people with a sense of fantasy, if you will, and they get so caught up in it. Because I know people literally who play video games day in and day out for hours and hours. I'm talking about grown folks, grown adults who play these games constantly as they say, a form of relaxation or something. I don't understand, because I think that's a colossal waste of life, but that's just me. But Is that also, could that be a contributor to the mental illness of the youth who have, a couple of generations coming up? Is that part of the problem? Do they think that, because think about it. We live in a society now where I remember, when I was coming up, you got your clothes dirty. Cat cracked out a turn, boom, hit him in the mouth. Y'all got y'all fight on. And usually after the fight, y'all was cool. Why? Because you respected each other's gully. You know what I'm saying? You respected the fact that that cat would get down for his. He respected the fact that he knew you would get down for yours. And y'all wasn't going to be quick to test each other again because you didn't want that smoke from neither one of y'all. So you respected each other, you shook hands, and you walked away. Now, everybody takes the nuclear option. Shoot them. You don't get to live and tell your story the next day. You're dead. End of game. Game over. Does that attitude, some of that come from some of these video games maybe? Has it evolved into a more serious thing? I mean, we look at, some of the major cities where kids are out here literally killing each other, killing other people, carjacking, doing whatever they want. As long as they got a pistol in their hand, they good. They scared to take an ass whooping, scared to get hit in the mouth. It's a hell of a thing, hell of a time we living in. And I don't care what nobody says. That's mental illness. When you don't have any connection to human life to the point of understanding that you believe your ego is larger than life itself, that you could take a life because you feel slighted, that's mental illness. Something wrong with you, especially when you know you're going to jail or you're going to die. One or the other. It's coming. Like death and taxes. It's coming. It's just not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I don't know. Then I wondered, is what happened in Florida just a thing because they were just kids and they were just doing what kids do, or did they know better? But then you got to think about it. They actually knew how to use these guns. They knew how to load if they weren't already loaded, but they actually knew how to make them fire. They knew how to pull the trigger, aim, and shoot. 12 and 14. Now, what's even crazier is when you look at that scenario, you got to remember also, these kids probably ain't going to go to jail. They're too young. They're probably not going to get prosecuted. They're definitely not going to get prosecuted in a court of law to the point where they're going to be where they're going to be spending the rest of their life in jail. Or, you shoot at the police as an adult male, oh, you gone. You're going to be gone for a long time. They're not. And especially if they are white. Now, I believe they did shoot the girl. She was the 14-year-old. She was shot, and they say she is in the hospital in critical condition. The boy did not get shot, and he, of course, 12 years old. I mean, it's going to be water under the bridge for him in a couple of years. But would the reaction be different if these were black children? But like I said, we may never know what they are because, again, they're children, they're minors, and the law, you cannot disclose the name or anything, video, photo, none of that, of a child in a criminal situation. So we'll never know unless somebody leaks it or it gets spoken upon. And even if they do, they're probably going to be in a lot of trouble because that, again, is against the law. But until the mental health aspects of these things are dealt with in America on a serious level, the things that we are shaking our heads at are going to only continually get worse. And that's something that we all have to deal with, and we cannot remain silent through it. And, that would make us that would put the hypocrisy in our court on that level. We just have to be, diligent about how we handle our children. Now, when it comes to Naomi Osaka, now, this young lady is a beast on the court. Now, the other day, she was fined $15,000 for not attending this press conference, which she was cool with because the girl getting paid. Now, I'm not sure what her worth is at this point, but she getting her money. She's like, okay, I'll pay the $15,000 because I don't want to go out there and I don't want to talk to reporters, which I personally believe should be her prerogative. I don't think she should have to do something she don't want to do. Okay. But they criticized her. Now, the reason she decided she didn't want to do, now this is according to other people, the reason she didn't want to do the thing was because she had been criticized about her, I guess, inability to be as effective on a clay court. And that sort of destroyed her confidence. So now let's look at the fact that here's a person who was a world-class athlete, and she let people who aren't even in the same game, people who are nothing more than critics, shake her. She got shook because of what people said about her. There's a level, and you're talking about somebody who already is dealing with depression, bipolar, I guess. How quickly can one change? Words put her in a state where she did not want to be in the game anymore. Now that's deep. That's real deep, y'all. You got to think about that. This is somebody who was highly successful at her game. This is somebody who got money longer than train smoke. She can do whatever she want now. But words from people who theoretically don't even count in her world caused her to say, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. It's mental illness, y'all. And I want to, and I think we ought to take the stigma of what mental illness means off what people have traditionally thought it to be. We have always sort of, when we talk about mental illness, it's like a big like taboo. And I think we need to stop that, because the more we reinforce that idea, then it makes people shy away from getting the help that they need. It's not a joke. And I believe that all of us suffer on some level or another from it. I really do. Chris Cheney says, when the mainstream values you internalize are not met, creativity, imagination, and fantasy are manifested. You sit around listening to degraded music and playing violent video games with the value system which lacks morality and fulfillment. Then the result is a mixture of fantasy and violence. Our community is suffering from unified, unfulfilled desires and frustration, depression and oppression. Absolutely, Chris. I agree with you 100%. And there's a lot more to that as well. That's definitely the truth. One of the things that I like about Naomi Osaka, beside the fact that she's a hell of a tennis player, she's an outspoken advocate of civil rights for black folks. I like how she wears her mask and she puts the names of slain black males on there. It's a shame I have to like that, because that's not something that we should even have to like. It's just a damn shame is what it is. But the fact that she makes it clear where she stands as far as that goes, and I like that. Now, Naomi, and I got the one, I started asking myself, what could be the genesis, the origin of her pain? And so I did a little digging into her background. And she was born in 1997 in a western Japanese city of Osaka. Now, her mother, Tamaki, and her father, who is Haitian, born Leonard Francois. Now, her parents apparently up and relocated to Osaka from the city of Hokkaido, where they met. So it turns out that the father was visiting Japan, and he was a college student from New York. And the reason they moved from Hokkaido to Osaka was because apparently Naomi's grandparents did not approve of the relationship between their daughter and this Haitian man. Are we really surprised? I don't think we are. They didn't approve of her choice and of the man she was in a relationship with, and they basically cut her off. So in other words, Naomi Osaka's grandparents basically cut off their daughter, Naomi's mother, because of her relationship with the Haitian man. Now, how many times have we seen this? Racism runs deep, and it doesn't matter what country. You got this right here. It makes you suspect to everyone else except us. And then here we are in the middle of dealing with all of this so-called Asian, let's stop Asian hate and all of this. But what's sad is, I don't know too many black folks that have ever hated Asians or caused Asians to have to relocate or up and move or kick them out of their country or any of that. But the Asians, oh, they're a nice racist group. Have you ever seen any of the advertisements that come out of some parts of Asia and Japan and some of those other places in China where they have the Sambo-looking soap packaging and all kinds of, some of that stuff is incredible. And here we are over here in this country. See, black folks got a problem. We always supporting everybody else except ourselves. Let something happen in France, had a bomb and everybody had a French flag over their face and on Facebook and all of this. Every time something happens somewhere else in the world, we quick to support everybody else. Yet here we are, can't even get an anti-lynching bill, cannot get reparations, cannot get the fairness that we deserve as people who actually built this country. It's what the black factor is. The black people, the factor in the equation without which you don't have a result. That's the black factor. That's what that is. That's what that means. One day, somebody's going to be honest and they're going to tell the truth about that. So, they moved from Osaka when Naomi was 3 and moved to New York. And she grew up in a Haitian household with her mother, who was Japanese, of course. And she was able to maintain some of her Japanese culture and customs because of her mother, but she was raised basically Haitian because she lived with her grandmother in New York, her grandmother on her father's side. And they then eventually moved to Florida when they were 9. Now, the interesting thing is that Naomi has always represented Japan. In the tennis tournaments that she goes to, she's always not represented Haiti, not represented America, because she's actually Japanese Haitian American. Because her father was an American citizen from Haiti. Her mother's from Japan, so she had dual citizenship. Well, actually, triple citizenship. Now, in case you're wondering why she decided to represent Japan and not the U.S. or Haiti, it's because Japanese law states that people with dual citizenship have to choose just before they turn 22. And she chose Japan. So that's why whenever you see her national ranking or whatever it is or whatever she identifies with is from Japan. Now, something that I didn't know, that she has an older sister named Marie, and I'm guessing Marie is like about a year older than her. She was born in April of 96. And she also plays tennis professionally, and she's been ranked as high as number 280. And she, in the last few days, has tried to help shed some light on what her sister's mental state is. And she said that the criticism of Naomi's ability to play on clay court is what prompted her to boycott the press conference. She stated that her confidence had been shattered. Now, we got to remember, on top of everything else, these are young people. These are young ladies. They're not that old. They're dealing with fame, fortune, and everything that comes with it, the criticisms and all of that. They mentally have to deal with all of these things on top of perform at the highest level. That's a lot. That can be very stressful. And if you're a person who's suffered from depression or any of this other stuff, then of course you're dealing with an awful lot. It's a lot to have to contend with. And people can sit there and say, oh, no, I had her money and I was doing what she was doing. I'd be straight. Yeah, you say that. It's easy to say. You got to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes before you know what you're talking about. All the wealth, the attention, her ability to perform, everything that comes with it. It's a whole lot. And people can say what they would do, but you just don't know. especially if you have other issues going on in your life, in your mental, that you got to deal with, you know. Now, and this is a speculation. I'm not going to say that, because I don't know, but I'm going to go out on a limb here. Naomi Osaka, Japanese Haitian American, dealing with the fact that her own family basically discriminated against her and her father and told their mother that obviously he wasn't good enough and so on. But now, all of a sudden, this biracial child status changes. She is now very wealthy and very famous and the first Japanese champion in history. Now, all of a sudden, the grandparents are fully embracing her, her mother, and the family. Now, do y'all not think that that is enough to cause a person to have levels of depression? When you know that your family didn't want you or cared anything about you until you became something or someone. Again, take away the fame, take away the money, and what do you have? You have a young lady whose family did not believe that her or her father were good enough. That's grounds enough for depression. That's grounds enough for bipolar. And that goes on and on and on. Don't ever say what you would do in a situation until you've walked in somebody else's shoes, until you know what they've been through or where they've been. Mental illness in the sports community, mental illness in our everyday communities is real. And it is unrecognized oftentimes because we refuse to acknowledge the fact that the things that we have normalized are not right. And they have to at some point be corrected. Otherwise, we continue to struggle and deal with things in our life and in our society that we shouldn't have to deal with. We have to stop normalizing illness, stop normalizing mental illness and the ways that we deal with our problems. That would require us to all be honest, extremely honest with ourselves and those around us. It is a very difficult thing to do because they say the truth hurts and most people just can't swallow the reality of who they are, because whoever you are is who you made yourself. Now, we all have obstacles, but the bottom line is you see people with those shirts on and those sayings, "Oh, I'm a self-made man." Guess what? All of us are. When you know better, you do better. When you recognize that you're not where you want to be, you correct that by getting where you need to be. And you can't let anybody stop you. I could give y'all a million stories of people who decided that they weren't going to be something that they didn't want to be. They changed it. They changed the game and they went on about their life. Then you got others who will use whatever happened in their life as a crutch. You got to decide. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Brian Forbes. I've been your host of The Black Factor. It is my time and I'm about to let you ride. I appreciate each and every one of y'all for coming out and hanging with your boy. It's been real, y'all. It's been fun, but I got to go. Love, peace, and chicken grease.